Hello and welcome to another edition of WTFGAS podcast. While this thing is working properly and while tier list is cooperating, something that has been a problem in recent days, let us get through this list. I've been out drinking tonight, and so I figured it was the perfect time to go for a little trip down memory lane. Let's talk about my childhood Sega CD collection. Unlike most of my other collections, I did not get most of these games through birthday presents and Christmas presents. A lot of these came to me as gifts from my Uncle Matt. Matt is Gen X. He was about 11 years older than I am. And when he would tire of games, when I would visit, he would frequently just give me a few at a time. So most of the games that I got on this list actually came from him as random gifts that were unexpected. There were others that I did acquire purposefully, but for the most part, a lot of these are things I experienced only incidentally because my uncle decided to just give them to me because he was tired of them. And because of that, I've always had a weird relationship with the Sega CD. Of all the consoles in my lifetime, I see this one as the one with the most missed opportunities. This clearly was a capable platform. It could do things that Sega did not choose to do with it. It had the capability of doing things beyond what the Genesis could do. Yet Sega always was focused on full motion video. And full motion video ended up not being the future. Now, at the time, around 1995, I was convinced that yes, the future would be partially full motion video games. I assumed that they would get more fluid and more controllable, but at the time I just assumed that it was partly because I sucked. That's part of why these games were so hard to play, is just because I wasn't that good at them. And that is part of it, but at the same time, a lot of it is that these games just weren't that great, and that full motion video is not a great way to play games. But at the time, I wasn't sure whether it was a me problem or a game problem. In the years since, it's become clear that it's mostly a problem with the games themselves. But at the time, I wasn't sure. And at the time, I also didn't know whether the future would be with more realistic full motion video or with 3D polygons. Of course, over time, 3D polygons won out, and the next generation was Saturn and PlayStation. And over time, they've become very realistic. So now full motion video is simply a gimmick that looks hokey and weird. And a lot of the weirdness of the full motion video games, the B-acting and all that, were things that I didn't quite catch onto as a kid. I didn't really exactly understand exactly how weird and hokey and cringeworthy some of these things were. It took me a while to really latch onto that. So, let's go ahead and rank my childhood Sega CD collection. This is to the best of my abilities to recollect. After I did the SNES one about 2 months ago now, I realized there were 2 games I did not include on that list, and, well, it's too late to go back now. But anyway, I think these are all the Sega CD games that I had at the time, before I turned 18. One game I had as a pack-in was Sewer Shark. When you got the Model 2 Sega CD, possibly even the Model 1, you had a copy of Sewer Shark with you the entire way. For me, Sewer Shark is basically the standard of what it means to be a full-motion video game. It's playable, and it has some appeal. It's a cool world that you're put into, where you're a co-pilot and your job is to complete a mission and make it to the surface, where then you will live a better life. So it kind of works story-wise on a very basic level. Mechanically, it's a bit rough, but it's not impossible. And it also is variable, so sometimes the game lasts longer than other times. The co-pilot that you have is a guy named Mad Dog, who has survived many missions as basically a gunner or whatever the fuck he's supposed to be. And he calls you dog meat and is kind of like your mentor. But at the same time, he is clearly a less skilled guy than you are. So he's supposed to be kind of a mentor / subordinate. So if you were a junior officer, he's kind of like your senior sergeant. He's a guy who's there to guide you, but at the same time, he can only guide you so far because there are certain skills you're expected to have that he doesn't share. I think that creates an interesting dynamic. So, for me, Sewer Shark is a C. And a lot of that is on the basis of personality. This is not a good game. It's certainly not a great game, but it does have a lot of personality to it. And I respect Sewer Shark for what it is. That being said, we should never expect too much out of any full motion video game. But if we're looking for a standard of what a full motion video game is, rather than what it should be, just what it is, and a functional version of that, then Sewer Shark is the standard. There are games that exceed it, but Sewer Shark is the one which is kind of definitional of what it means to be a full motion video game. Next up is Afterburner 3. This is the Sega CD exclusive version of Afterburner. So, the arcade original is called Afterburner. There was a 32X port called Afterburner. The Genesis got Afterburner 2. The Mega Master System got the original Afterburner port, which was a little bit degraded because it was for an 8-bit system. And Sega CD got Afterburner 3. Now for me, I eventually got the Afterburner port for 32X. I know a lot of people consider that to be superior, but for me, Afterburner 3 is the best version of the game. This is the most advanced. It had the best music, the best graphics in my opinion, the best level design, all of that. For me, Afterburner 3 is the best that Afterburner can be. It has the best intro. It is the one which seems to have the most going on overall. For me, Afterburner 3 is a solid B. I can't really go higher than that. I don't really see that it has much potential beyond that point, but it is a pretty solid game overall. I enjoyed it as a kid. I'm not sure how I'd feel about it as an adult now. I might try that out, see how it works for me. But for the most part, I think Afterburner 3 is a pretty solid game, and it has my respect. Next up is another game featuring the F-14 Tomcat. This is Tomcat Alley. So, excuse me, had bad allergies the last couple weeks. I'm not ill. I just have been suffering from allergies, and it is kicking my ass a bit. So, Tomcat Alley is a game that is full motion video. It features the F-14 Tomcat, and it is the most functional of all the full motion video games I've ever played. My uncle gave me this one as a gift. I think he also gave me Afterburner 3 to be fair, but I definitely know he gave me Tomcat Alley. This is a game that he kind of made fun of a little bit. He said maybe I'd enjoy it. He knew that I was really into jets and things of that nature. And you know what? I actually did enjoy this game quite a bit. I played the shit out of Tomcat Alley. It's not objectively a good game, though. It's a game that's kind of okay. More or less, you hit buttons in response to events on the screen and things happen. But that being said, it is more responsive than most of the full motion video games we'll look at. For me, Tomcat Alley is a solid B. I got a lot of enjoyment out of this as a kid. It's one I can still play, but I don't really enjoy that much as an adult. But as a kid, to me, this looked like the future. Remember what I said. I thought full motion video would be the future. And for me, Tomcat Alley was kind of one of a handful of games that represented what the future might look like. Another one was Doom on 32X, that specific version. That was the only Doom I knew at the time, and I knew that would be part of the future. I was right about that, to an extent. Tomcat Alley, of course, was a dead end. But Tomcat Alley, for me, was a solid game, and I got a good deal of enjoyment out of it. Next up is Wolfchild. Another game my Uncle Matt gave me. Wolfchild is not that different than the Genesis or SNES version, just a little bit bigger and better, with better sound. It's sort of a generic platform action game. Personally, it's not really my cup of tea. It's one of those games I always thought was cool in terms of the theme and some of the things going on in it, but it wasn't really something that really appealed to me. So I played it a little bit, a lot, and then I'd always pull it out and put something else in. For me, Wolfchild is a D. It's probably a bit better than the Genesis and SNES versions, which I admittedly never owned, but I have played via emulator. And that being said, the game itself, Wolfchild, not that great. But at the time, at least was cool. Next up is the Terminator. not to be confused with Terminator 2. Now, on Genesis, this game wasn't that great. On SNES, it was pretty decent. On Sega CD, however, this game was pretty solid. The game had better sound, a little bit better level design, better graphics, better sound, all that stuff. Better music. Pretty solid demonstration of what Sega CD could do vis-a-vis the 16-bit competition. That being said, while the game is superior to what you could get on cartridge, it is still kind of a generic action platform style game. For me, that's not really a genre I enjoy that much, so the Terminator is only a C. Next up is a gold CD. H3 Thunderstrike. Now, back in the 90s, most games were still manufactured and, designed and published in Japan. One exception is H3 Thunderstrike, which was developed in the United States. I didn't know at the time. But what I did know is that I'd gone with my dad to the mall one time where my mom and my sisters had stayed home. I went with him. And we'd gone into an electronics store for something else that he needed. And they happened to have Sega CD games there. One of them was on sale for $20. And it had a helicopter on it. He thought it might be cool, so he offered to buy it for me. And basically as sort of like a thank you for coming with him to the mall. So I was eager to play this. It looked pretty cool. This was back in the early 90s when the idea was that, like some invincible American vehicle or aircraft or whatever would be hard to stop and would just tear ass through the enemy. Because the Persian Gulf War had just gone down a couple years before. There was a kind of general sense of American invincibility. So I played H3 Thunderstrike, and to this day, this is my favorite Sega CD game. For a time, I thought this was related to the Desert Strike series. It is not. It is not by EA. It's a 3D environment, 3D shooter where you play as an Apache helicopter and kick ass. This game is actually very good. I recommend everyone with a Sega CD or a Sega CD emulator check this out. The game remains playable to this day. Level design is nothing super special by today's standards, but by the standards of the 90s, this was very solid. I enjoyed it a great deal. And for me, H3 Thunderstrike is an S tier game. For me, this is the ultimate Sega CD game. This is a demonstration of the Sega CD's capabilities. It shows it could do more than just FMV. Certainly, this could not be done on the Genesis or an SNES. The game itself is very good looking by the standards of like 1993 or whenever it was made. It plays well. Level design's decent. At least you get to choose different campaigns, so you're not bound to a specific level order. Everything about it is interesting and unique for the time. I think it holds up reasonably well. Certainly, I can say for a fact, this is better than the sequel that came out on PlayStation and Saturn. The sequel, Thunderstrike 2, fucking sucks. This game is still good, though, and I recommend it. S tier for me. Next up is Sylfeed. Genesis had a game called Sylfeed, which was a space shooter, horizontal scrolling, and that game is pretty good. The difference between Sylfeed on the Genesis and Sylfeed on the Sega CD is basically the sound. The music in Sylfeed is more advanced. It's more complicated, a little better, better instrumentation. But otherwise, it's the same game, and there's a code you can get 99 lives. I enjoyed both versions of the game. For me, Sylfeed was the original, and I was actually surprised there was a Genesis version with a different name. For me, Sylfeed is a solid B. I played this quite a bit as a kid, and as an adult, I've continued to enjoy this, especially once I learned that there's a code that allowed me to beat the game. So, this is actually one of the very few horizontal shooters that I've beaten because of that code. I'm not very good at those kind of games with a bunch of shit on the screen blowing up all over the place. But this is one that I was able to beat due to the code, and I appreciate it for what it is. It's not one of the great horizontal shooters, but it is pretty solid. And for me, it's a B. Next up is Sylfeed. Sylfeed is a 3D shooter with sort of an overhead perspective. It has polygonal graphics, which were pretty original at the time. This game comes out around 93, 94. And it is one of the more advanced Sega CD games, at least as far as I'm concerned. Looks good, sounds good. Gameplay-wise, it's a little underwhelming, though. I never really got fully into it. It's one of those games I appreciated for its technical brilliance, but I could never quite get into. It just wasn't quite there. And this is a game I picked up on sale somewhere. I don't remember exactly where. I think it was the PX in 1995, after I already had a Saturn and all that stuff. So this was a game I played a little after its prime, but I got it for about $20 on clearance. Anyway, Sylfeed for me is a C. It was one of those games I thought it was cool, but I never really got super into it because the difficulty is pretty high, and by that point I also had better things to be doing. Alright, next up is Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. The Genesis version is a fighting game, which is playable. Not good, but playable. The SNES version is a scrolling beat-em-up. One that I never had as a kid. I did rent it, though. Pretty good game. A little weird that Kimberly and Trina are every bit as buff as the other Power Rangers, but whatever. That's forgivable. This version is a full-motion video version of the cartoon. And, yeah. Rough. Very, very, very rough. The button presses are very arbitrary in terms of the timing. And I've never had great timing. I've never been able to play things like Guitar Hero. And in effect, this plays the same way as those later games. So this is like 2 generations before that, though. So, imagine playing Guitar Hero style gameplay, but watching a grainy episode of Power Rangers. Because that's what this is. Now, for me, I thought it was cool at the time, but this game seriously pissed me off in ways I can barely describe. I mean, this game got me into white-hot fury territory. This game pissed me the fuck off as a kid. It was one of the few games that made me want to throw a controller, but I didn't for fear of my parents. But I thought about it. For me, Power Rangers on Sega CD is an F. I fucking hated this game, and it pissed me off to no end. Next up is Star Wars Rebel Assault. This was a PC port for Sega CD. I believe it also came out for 3DO, but I don't know that for sure. There was a sequel on PlayStation, Rebel Assault 2. I never played much Rebel Assault 2, even though I did have the game as a kid. I did play a decent amount of Rebel Assault 1, though. This game is a little difficult to get into. There are a lot of different play modes. It's not super intuitive. That being said, this game has the cool factor. It's one of those games I kind of reserved as, okay, this is something I will appreciate more when I'm older. What I didn't keep in mind, though, is that games will get better over time. So this is a game I've held on to for years, and I've never really revisited fully and invested in because I have better shit to do. Gaming-wise and otherwise. But this is a game which has some depth to it. It is kind of cool. And the developers clearly put in a lot of effort. That being said, it is not easy to enter. And for me, Rebel Assault is basically a C. It's one of those games I respected, and I always thought of it as being something I would get into later. But up to this point, it really hasn't happened. And probably never will, if we're being honest. It's one of those things I wish it would happen, where I'd be able to get into it and really play it and experience it as it was meant to be experienced for mature gamers back in the early 90s. But as things stand, I got better shit to do. And I'll probably never experience it the way it was meant to be experienced. Next up is a game I did appreciate for what it was. Final Fight CD. One game I forgot to mention when I was talking about Super Nintendo games was Final Fight, the Super Nintendo version. A game that I had and got rid of. Guy was missing. And for me, I like the speed characters better than the power characters. In a beat 'em up, speed is key. You can't live without speed. Because you have to beat the enemies to their attacks. So if you're a slow motherfucker like Hagar, then you're fucked from the get-go. Speed is all that matters in beat 'em ups. Now, there are people like Max from Streets of Rage and shit like that. I'm not one of those people. When I play through Streets of Rage, I might play through every character, but I don't do the slow power characters. Those guys, one, bore the fuck out of me, and two, I can't really play as them very well. So I'm always about characters like Guy, or more balanced characters like Cody. Fuck Hagar. He can eat my asshole. He sucks. So I wanted to play as Cody. So rather than waiting for Final Fight Guy on SNES, I instead got Final Fight CD. And I don't remember whether I bought this or whether I got it from my uncle, but it might have been from my uncle. Either way, this game is great. It's an almost perfect port of the arcade, and if anything, has better sound. The music is definitely better on Sega CD than it is in the arcade. And I know that for sure because I got the Capcom Beat 'em Up collection for Xbox One. And the music on Sega CD sounds way better than the music on the arcade. A little bit of loading time, but that's not a big deal. And we're talking about a few seconds. I know people like to bitch about loading time, but a lot of times it was really only a few seconds, which isn't shit. Okay? For me, Final Fight CD is a solid A. It is the best port of Final Fight. It enhances a few things. Very solid game. I never quite beat it. I made it to the second to last level, pretty deep about at the boss fight. But very good. Of course, I had to play as Guy. I cannot get that far as Hagar. If I played as Hagar, I might get to like level 2 at best. So I have to play as the speed characters because that's how I play games. But yeah, very good game, and I enjoyed it immensely. Next up is Bill Walsh's College Football. I don't remember how I got this game. It probably through my Uncle Matt, though. I've never had any interest in football whatsoever. And that's why I suspect I got it from Matt, because otherwise I probably would have never played this. I've had zero interest in football from the time I was a little boy to the present. The game does not interest me at all. I know I've had friends, including Sean, who frequently joins me on my main channel, who told me about how football is intricate and based on strategy. I frankly don't give a fuck. To me, football is nothing more than a bunch of very stocky men lining up and running into each other. That's all it's ever been. Just a bunch of dudes bashing the shit out of each other for no reason. That being said, I did get into this game, oddly enough. It is a solid football game, as far as I can tell. I enjoyed experimenting with different plays and running different plays to see what would happen. I didn't play this in any great depth. I'd play it for maybe 45 minutes at a time, but I did have fun with it. And so for me, Bill Walsh's College Football is a solid C. Decent enough game. That being said, I can't give it a higher rank because it never got me to think, so what if I played a better football game? What if I tried Game Day for PlayStation or one of the more modern Maddens? It never caused me to have that thought. But for what it was okay. Therefore, it gets a C. Next up is Corpse Killer. Corpse Killer this is for Sega CD 32X specifically. That's the version I had. This is a game where you go on an island, I think it's Jamaica, and you shoot a bunch of zombies, and you have a Jamaican guide as your friend. Very odd game, weird sense of humor. The doctor there seems like Dr. Forrester from Mr. Science Theater. I like the atmosphere, I like the setting. The gameplay itself, however, while it does provide you with some options, kind of sucks ass. And for me, Corpse Killer is a D. And a lot of that rating is just for I like the atmosphere, and in retrospect, that guy reminds me a lot of Dr. Forrester, who I respect. If it weren't for the Dr. Forrester analog character, I'd probably give this a much lower rating, though. Because the game itself is kind of ass. Okay. Supreme Warrior. I also had the Sega CD 32X version of that, rather than the regular 32X version. Supreme Warrior is much like Corpse Killer. It is a little bit enhanced with the 32X add-on. It's sort of a fighting game in the first person, where you respond to button presses and someone talks shit to you. The dialogue's pretty funny, I will give it that. And in a way, I kind of enjoy it. I want to say it's a good game, but it is enjoyable. For short periods. And it's also one of those games that's great if you have company over. When warriors are talking shit to you and you can fight in the first person. It's very much a novelty item. I'm going to give it a C, though, because I found it amusing. It's one of those, I thought maybe when I'm older, I will realize how to play this. What I realized when I'm older is this game's a piece of shit, but it is funny. That being said, it is still useful if you can get it to run. If you run on an emulator and have friends over, you can have a good time. But don't be expecting anything more than that, because this game does suck on a fundamental level. But it is amusing. And speaking of games that are kind of shit but also amusing and full motion video, Slam City with Scottie Pippen. Low-key as a kid, I watched the late 90s Bulls with the trio of Jordan, Pippen, Rodman. And in many ways, Pippen was my favorite. Pippen was a great defender. He could jam, he could shoot, he could do all the things that Jordan could do. Maybe a little less well, but I felt like he was a little underrated even then. And in the years since, my empathy for Pippen has grown. As a lot of people have said, any other asshole could have done what Pippen did alongside Jordan. I disagree, but I'm a Pippen fan. And so when Pippen got his own game, I was excited for him. And Pippen, in this game, you have to beat all 4 of the bosses on all 4 discs to get to him. I've never done that. I've only beaten one of the guys named Fingers on this. The other bosses are really hard to beat. I've come very close to beating another one. I think it was Juice or Mad Dog. Actually, I've come close to beating both of them, but never quite done it. Controls here aren't impossible, but they're not great. And so I've never done it, but I've come close. For me, Slam City with Scottie Pippen is a B. I feel like I'm being very generous here, but this is based a lot on my memory. So I feel like Slam City is a decent game. It's not. It's shit. But I did enjoy it as a kid. And it did spur my imagination. It made me think about how one-on-one games actually work. And as someone who lacks any form of athleticism, I've managed to win a fair amount of one-on-one games because I can think the game. And because I have some finesse, even if I don't have a lot of explosion or strength or anything like that. So, actually, this is a game I actually value in a way. So, for me, it's a B. If you've never played this and you go play it right now, you'd be like, why is he giving this a B? This sucks dick. I feel you. But, for me, this game at the time wasn't that bad. And it's kind of fun. Also, the cutscenes on this are fucking hilarious. They're super 90s. The most 90s things you will ever see are the cutscenes on Slam City with Scottie Pippen. There's this one hustler asshole there who, if you lose, will bet against you and say, hey, $50 for my rent. Anyway. Damn. Anyway. Yo, do like this hee thing going on. And, it's pretty funny. And also, there's like a bunch of people on sidelines who like dance and shit. And your girlfriend is a woman, I forget her name. Lucy, maybe? She will basically tell you in no uncertain terms. And I even picked up on this as a little kid, like a 3rd grader. Basically, you're not going to get fucked unless you win the game. So if you lose, she will fuck the person that beat you. So it's pretty fucked up in that way. That being said, I appreciate it for what it is. As far as full motion video games go, it's pretty funny. It's not good, but it is amusing. And this is a game, if you had to choose any full motion video game to show your friends, like at a gathering for fun, go with Slam City with Scottie Pippen. Last and not least is Mortal Kombat for Sega CD. Yes, there are loading times. And yes, when Shang Tsung switches forms, there are loading times. Granted. But this is the best version of Mortal Kombat available before you had arcade perfect ports on the PS2 and beyond. This is the version of the game. Make no mistakes about it. The SNES version is very good, despite not having blood. It is inferior to this. The Genesis version had blood. This version also has blood, but without having to have some goddamn bullshit code. I got this game. I didn't have to put in any fucking codes, and I was still able to get blood. And the graphics and sound were way better than what you could get on the standard Genesis. And it's 6-button compatible. The Genesis version of this game, which a lot of people play up as the definitive port, isn't fit to suck this version's dick. I'm not kidding you. This version is the shit. This version is a solid A. It doesn't improve on anything, and there are some load times, but this is the best arcade port on the Sega Genesis. Or CD, excuse me. Now, Final Fight CD also kicks ass as a port. But Mortal Kombat is up there. Actually, I'd say both of those are kick-ass ports. I can't put them in the S tier because they're not all that original. But both of these ports are absolutely superior to anything you can get on either the basic Genesis or the SNES. So, if you're looking for games to play on Sega CD that you've never tried before, I mean, there's the Lunar games, obviously, and a few others, but the ones I would really recommend, H3 Thunderstrike, this game fucking kicks ass. This Final Fight CD, Mortal Kombat, those are excellent. Afterburner 3, Tomcat Alley, Sylfeed, maybe Slam City, but don't expect too much. Sewer Shark is fun, just don't expect too much. Same thing for all of these. Rebel Assault's one that might have hidden depth, I don't know. And Sylfeed has some potential to it also. But those are ones that might disappoint you, but also might give you something more than what you think. Terminator is one that a lot of other people enjoy more than I do. But I will admit, it is very good for what it is. And Supreme Warrior is hilarious as hell. Gameplay sucks. Corpse Killer, funny as hell. Gameplay's kind of ass. Wolf Child, if you're really good with action platformers. Power Rangers, this game sucks dick. Don't play this. This game should be burned. This game sucks. Anyway, that's all I have for you. Those are my childhood Sega CD games. I've been suffering horribly from allergies. I was out drinking tonight, obviously, as you can probably tell. But mostly the problem that's been holding me back are my allergies. So, sorry for all the coughing and everything, but, it is what it is. Those are my Sega CD games as a kid. And, again, this is the WTFGAS channel. Who the fuck gives a shit? So, I did not feel the need to make a perfect broadcast. And luckily, because I didn't, Anyway, this is all I got for you tonight. Peace out.